Hello. The Divine Code reading for July 11th, pages 67 and 68. Today's halakas deal with the topic of circumcision. In the chapter on prohibition against making a new religion or adding a commandment. Halakha number 4. The commandment of circumcision to Abraham was for the males of his own household and for his male offspring he would have after he received the commandment. As it says in Genesis, you and your offspring after you for their generations. This does not include any direct descendants of Ishmael, and they can no longer be identified as explained in the next page. As it says also in Genesis, whatever Sarah tells you, heed her voice, since through Isaac will offspring be considered yours. It also does not include the descendants of Esau, since Isaac said to Jacob, also in Genesis, and God will give the blessings of Abraham to you and your descendants, that you may possess the land of your sojourns, which God gave to Abraham. This means that Jacob alone is the child from Abraham and Isaac who agreed to follow that religious path and unique divine service. Thus, Abraham's descendants through Jacob are commanded in circumcision. The descendants of Abraham's children from his wife Keturah, who were born after Ishmael and Isaac, are also obligated to circumcise their male children on the 8th day from birth. The commandment of circumcision to Abraham himself included only himself, Ishmael, Isaac, and his servants. And therefore the children of Ishmael and Esau are not included in the commandment. You and your offspring, that is your personal offspring. That was said to Abraham, and it only explicitly includes Ishmael and Isaac themselves. Esau's descendants, as explained, are not considered Isaac's descendants. However, the children of Keturah, who were not alive at the time of the command of circumcision, and therefore they are not excluded by the specifications, are included in the later injunction to you and your descendants. So the rabbis understand through this way of looking at the wording of the Torah, they're able to determine who would be included and who would not be included within the households. Since the descendants of Keturah became intermingled with the descendants of Ishmael, all of them are obligated to circumcise their male children on the 8th day. However, the children of Keturah are not liable to punishment by a court for not observing this commandment, since it is not part of the 7 Noahide commandments. This is explained in Rambam, Laws of Kings 10:8. However, the male descendants of Keturah still receive spiritual excision if they remain uncircumcised. It is clear from the Torah, as it is clear from the Torah, since we learn their obligation to circumcise from the verse, and an uncircumcised male shall be cut off, that he has despised my covenant. And this is further explained in Tractate Sanhedrin 59b. So we see from this that there's a spiritual inclusion of the Torah's children. But if they're not circumcised, then they don't participate in this spiritual inclusion. They are only commanded to circumcise their thick foreskin, but not the underlying covering of the thin skin. Sha'agart, Area, chapter 49, Minhag Chinuch, Commandment 2, based on Tractate Yevamot 79b. But Rambam writes in a responsa that Jews may circumcise the thick and thin foreskin of a Gentile if requested, and it appears that Gentiles may circumcise themselves and their sons in this way. There's two different types of circumcision. There's the normal hospital for non-Jews, the hospital circumcision, and then there's a Jewish form, a specific for the Jewish people form of circumcision. And there's a lot of controversy about whether or not the Gentile can have the Jewish form of circumcision done, or if it's only the hospital form. And I'm going to suggest that a lot of the halakha involved in this, and this is my own take on this, a lot of the halakhas concerning circumcision involve what today does not exist, the status of an Eved Kanani, a slave in the Bible, a non-Jewish slave. There's three different, well, more than three, but there's two different types of non-Jewish slaves in the Bible. There is the Ger Teshav, who takes on the 7 Noahide commandments, and there's the Eved Kanani, who takes on, basically becomes almost a Jew. He takes on, well, he is circumcised, and he's dunked in a mikvah. He takes on the laws as they apply to a Jew, which is the negative commandments and some of the positive commandments. Curiously, it's similar to the laws that apply to a woman. The Eved Kanani is on a very different status from a Ger Teshav. Today, this is really not an area that's studied. And as the Noahide movement has tried to understand itself, a lot of these halakhas have gotten mixed up. And it's blended together in a way that it just creates a lot of confusion. And there is in the law, in the Shulchan Aruch, in the laws of Shabbos, halakha 304, chapter 304. At the end of that halakha, there's a discussion that perhaps the Eved Kanani status can be given to a regular worker who's not a slave but a regular worker. It's an area that created the Chafetz Chaim a lot of concern and the commentaries, and it needs to be studied out more fully, if for no other reason so we don't create confusion because of a lack of study, and we wind up blending together these different statuses. So when we're talking about a non-Jew being circumcised in a full Jewish manner, I'm going to suggest that this refers to the Eved Kanani, and perhaps the Sakir, the worker, the non-slave worker, who apparently is able to take on this status of an Eved Kanani. And this needs a lot more study in order for us not to create the confusions that unfortunately we've seen in the Noahide movement. Halakha number 5. One who is not from the descendants of Abraham, who wishes to be circumcised, if he does so as a direct command of God, violates a prohibition of adding a religion or a commandment. However, if he has himself circumcised because he wishes to do so as a gift to God, he is permitted to do so, and he receives spiritual reward for doing so. So if a non-Jew wishes to take on circumcision in a religious sense, he may do so as a sort of like a sacrificial offering, where he's saying he wants to dedicate that aspect of his life to holiness. He may do so. He cannot do it saying that it's a direct command, that he has a commandment to do this, because he doesn't have a commandment to do it. But he's allowed to do it, and this is very important, he can receive a spiritual reward for it. This spiritual reward, the way it's been explained to me, is because it's a spiritual. Normally, the non-Jew would not receive spiritual reward for doing it. That's the reward that's received for doing a commandment. Even though it's not a commandment, he can receive a spiritual reward as a person who is doing a commandment, because I've been told this is because of the specifics of not knowing who the children of Keturah are, and therefore this is allowed for the general population as such. And there could be a spiritual reward for the person doing this. Rambam writes in the Laws of Kings 8:10 that a Gentile who accepts upon himself to be circumcised and does not do so for 12 months is a deviant believer. Now, I'm going to suggest, and this is my own suggestion, that when we're talking about the person, and this footnote goes on for a distance, when we're talking about this person who takes on the mitzvah to be circumcised, I'm going to suggest that this is referring to the Eved Kanani, or perhaps the Sakir, the regular worker who is taking on this status similar to an Eved Kanani. And I'm going to suggest, because of that this does not apply today. I'm going to suggest that the Eved Kanani status does not apply today, and therefore this aspect of this 12 months necessity is a theoretical rather than a practical area of study. That's my own take on this. Rambam writes in the Laws of Kings 8:10 that a Gentile who accepts upon himself to be circumcised and does not do so for 12 months is a deviant believer. This is stated by Rabbi Yochanan in Tractate of Avodah 65a. This forces us to say that the Rambam considered circumcision to be an exception to the other commandments that Gentiles may keep as a commandment to themselves because of the prohibition against adding a religion. See Laws of Kings 10:9. The reason may be that this command was given to the descendants of Abraham before the giving of the Torah, and it was never nullified, as we see that the descendants of Keturah are still obligated in it. Therefore, anyone who wishes to have himself or his son circumcised in observance of this commandment may do so, and he is included with the nations that are in the covenant of Abraham. However, he is not obligated to do so. According to Ramban, a Gentile who accepts upon himself, Rambam, the Gentile who accepts upon himself to have a circumcision and does not do so is called a deviant believer. It is unclear if this only applies to one who accepts upon himself before a Jewish court of three, since he would be denying his binding promise, or if he applies even, or if this applies, even if he accepts it only privately, and he would be liable by judgment of heaven unless he carries out his personal promise. According to the latter situation, if others hear of his acceptance, they must always compel him to keep his promise to be circumcised, even nowadays. The author notes that other authorities disagree with Rambam. See Rima Yoredea, end of chapter 263, and hold that a Jew may not circumcise a Gentile. Seemingly, a Gentile himself is never under any obligation to be circumcised and cannot be called a deviant believer because he has withdrawn a decision to circumcise himself. These authorities do not accept Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, Tractate of Avodah Zarah, as Torah law. Because of the unclearness of Rambam's opinion in regard to our time and the disagreement, the words of Rabbi Yochanan and Rambam have been omitted from the main text. Now, I'm reading all this out of a long footnote. And yeah, so a lot of this is kind of being left open in the divine code. I understand this because it's an area, by my opinion, by my whatever it's worth, my 2 cents, is that it needs to be studied more. My idea is that this is referring to the Eved Kanani, which is a status that doesn't apply today. And because of the large amount of friction, of dispute that's going on within the Noahide community, it needs to be studied out more. And it needs to be clarified. Because a lot of the Noahides are confusing the halachas that apply to the Eved Kanani as somehow they're blending it in with the Noahide laws or the Noahide movement, and this needs to be studied more. Thank you.